Hello and welcome to Unscripted. I'm your host, Alicia Batillo. Gun violence is affecting us all in this community, and it's a conversation we're having nationwide and right here in Kern County. So we decided to bring the conversation right here to the 23 ABC studio. So I want to introduce you all to my wonderful panel from Kern County, right here in Bakersfield, local people just like you that will be talking about guns in America. I want to introduce you all to Pastor V.K. Jones, pastor at the People's Missionary Baptist Church, Rafael Esqueda, owner of Get a Gun, Tammy Hughes, parent at Kern Valley High School, Lisa Jo Gage, parent at McKee Middle School, Kate Guntijo, student at Bakersfield High School, Jason Gifford, behavioral health supervisor. Thank you all so much for joining me. I know that I've been bugging you about this topic, and I'm so happy that today is finally here because it's an important matter. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I know that you all have opinions, and I know that you're all very vocal about how you feel on guns, and I know that the people in Kern County really care about guns here and their opinion too. So I want you all to speak for your friends, for your family members, and just be open. This is unscripted.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get right into it. Recently, the FBI released a report, and that report said that there are more active shooters and more people killed by active shooters last year than any single year. Research shows last year 138 people were killed in 30 separate active shootings in the U.S. The FBI defines an active shooter as anyone actively killing or trying to kill people in a populated area. Let's take a look back at some of the most deadliest single-day mass shootings in America.
He said we needed to pursue him, that he just shot up the church.
I just remember sitting there and reading about them. All these kids and the teacher.
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
The 21st graders of the Sandy Hook Massacre.
It was a night of, terror and horror and all of that stuff, but we wanted to change the date and, kind of make it our own.
Investigators say a shooter walked into the packed club and opened fire before killing 49 and hurting so many more.
They came here simply to worship, but police say he was here solely to kill, confessing to shooting and killing 9 people in this historic black church in Charleston Wednesday.
4 hours of terror in San Bernardino after gunmen stormed an office building, killing 14 people.
A barrage of gunfire on the Las Vegas Strip as a lone gunman fired down on a crowd of 22,000 unsuspecting country music fans.
Watching those images, how did that make you feel, Pastor V.K. Jones?
It's disturbing. Especially when you consider that it doesn't have to be that way. It's really disturbing to watch and to know that those people had to go through that horror.
Lisa Jo.
I think that it's just it touches every individual that sees it, even if you're not connected to it. But knowing that that could happen at this point in our society can happen anywhere at any time. It's not something that used to be. Growing up, I don't remember that happening, but now it's more frequent as we move forward.
I can see the emotion on some of you all's faces. I mean, what other thoughts do you want to add to that?
It's just scary as a parent. I'm gonna get emotional. Just to think that any day when my child goes to school, they might not come home because something happened. And you feel like there's nothing you can do.
And as a student, I mean, I know I showed clips of Parkland, the recent shooting that happened at a school. Kat, you are an 11th grader at BHS. Your thoughts?
It humbles me to think that it could happen at any time, especially with BHS being such an open campus. They're working on fixing that right now, but because of where we're located, it could happen at any given moment. We're lucky to have BHS go on lockdown when instances like someone is suspected with a gun approaches the campus. they take the correct measurements in that sense, but it could happen at any point.
Now, days after that Parkland shooting, where a former student killed 17 people, President Donald Trump tweeted this, and I want to bring up the tweet. In a tweet saying, quote, "I never said give teachers guns. What I said was to look at the possibility of giving concealed guns to gun-adept teachers with military or special training experience. Only the best. 20% of teachers, a lot, would now be able to." What do you all think of President Donald Trump's tweet? You know, he didn't say give all guns to teachers. He said give guns to teachers who are qualified, who went through special training. That's a big difference. So what are your thoughts on that?
Who determines what that special training is? And why is that's an additional duty given to a teacher who is already struggling to teach our children in this type of society? Why not have security on the campus that are trained and know how to do it, rather than put another duty onto the teacher?
I think if a teacher wants that responsibility and is willing to go through the training and to do what's necessary, that teacher ought to have that option. The coach teacher that was killed in Parkland, instead of having, if he had been allowed to conceal carry, instead of using himself as a human shield to protect his students and losing his life, maybe he could have brought that situation to an end a lot quicker without loss of life for the students or himself.
But think about it as a student. How would you feel if your teacher had a weapon and possibly used that against you as a student in the classroom?
I don't think that would be an issue. The teachers have respect. I don't see why they would actually use a gun against a student themselves. But it's another tool, a tool in the classroom to not only teach while you're there, but also to protect your class. There's only so many police you can have on campus, and it can only be so many areas, as we saw in the Parkland shooting. The officer didn't even bother to enter the building.
But I don't think that a gun in a classroom is another tool. I think that a marker in a classroom is another tool. So would you
feel safer if the cop was standing in the classroom with you?
I don't think that there should be a cop at a classroom. I think that we should just have higher security measures.
So you're going to throw books at the active shooter?
No, I'm going to hope that my security defends me.
I think Kat brings up an interesting point, because studies indicate that one of the biggest predictors of violence in school settings, both peer-to-peer and peer-to-teacher, are conflictual relationships between students and teachers. And if the subjective response from the student's position is that this is a more conflictual situation, we can see why that might lead to actually more violence on the school campus.
But I would think that the idea is it's concealed carry. The teacher's not walking around with a gun exposed, and it shouldn't even be that the student knows that teacher has a gun unless that teacher has to use that gun to protect the student.
But that's not to say that a teacher wouldn't inform a class as like maybe a bragging thing.
What would you recommend that teachers do then? Or what rules do you want in place? What law do you want in place in schools?
I'd like to see more security guards on campus.
Carrying a gun or not carrying a gun?
I'm not opposed to the security guards carrying guns. I think that in our society now that's just part of the regular life. Even years ago, when we first immigrated to America, guns were always a thing in America, and it will never not be a thing in America. We'll always have guns, and that's just the pride that Americans have of being able to carry weapons. But I don't think that guns should be allowed on campuses, because classrooms are meant to be a place of education and thriving, brilliant minds, and to control them with weapons like that is unnecessary.
But the gun is not to control the class; it's to protect the class.
Absolutely.
To me, it doesn't make sense to give a child. They sell Kevlar backpacks.
No, explain what those are for those that don't know.
Kevlar is bulletproof. They sell backpacks for kids now where they're bulletproof, or they can put the metal plate in there to use it as a protector. I would rather my child have a armed, trained adult to protect them rather than them having to use a backpack as a shield.
And I agree. I would rather have an armed and trained adult, but not my teacher.
Because you don't feel
But that's the one that's with you right then. Like, if you don't, you're not going to get an armed security guard in each classroom.
No.
But we're just not going to. But we're going to have kids coming to schools and shooting as many people as they can. If you're in a classroom, I would rather my child be in a classroom with a teacher that is protected, that will protect my child, and use the force that needs to be, because I'd rather that shooter be taken down than any of those kids.
Exactly.
So when you have a CCW in a classroom, don't you have to have the weapon locked up in the back of the classroom in a safe, a gun safe?
Well, in California, there is no guns allowed on campus.
Right.
That was passed this year.
Yes,
Yeah.
unless you're a current peace officer or a retired peace officer, the only people allowed to.
So are those the men that, or men and women that are in the police cars on our campuses?
But realistically, how many teachers are going to go and get that additional training? What did he say? Trump said something about 20%?
Yeah, 20%.
So it may not be your teacher in your class. Whereas if you could have multiple security guards that are armed, that are trained, and that's their primary job there, their primary job is not teaching, but to protect, then I think that to me would make more sense than to know what if there's an active shooter. I want my child to be like, oh my goodness, does my teacher have a gun? I don't know. Or does that teacher have a gun? Who has a gun? Who's going to protect us? You have those security guards there. They know they are there to protect them.
Well, let me ask a question.
That's the element of surprise, though, because if you think about it, why do they choose schools? They're gun-free zones.
Absolutely.
They know this. It's a given fact. So they pick these schools because they know there's nobody there to actually do anything to them. So now you have the element of surprise. The potential shooter shows up to a campus, and somebody they thought was just going to be a simple victim actually ended up being the person that took him down or ended the situation. That's the advantage of that. Concealed carry, the gun's not there, nobody knows it's there. I've carried a gun for 20 plus years and nobody's ever noticed I've had one.
All right, let's shift gears for a minute. A lot of the comments that I read after posting mass shootings have to deal with connections with mental illness. And a lot of people say that mental illness is connected to mass shootings. In fact, LA Times article written just days after the Parkland shooting said that at least 59% of the 185 public mass shootings that took place in the United States from 1900 through 2017 were carried out by people who had either been diagnosed with a mental disorder or demonstrated signs of serious mental illness. However, I was speaking with Jason's boss on the phone, and you guys, you work at behavioral health here in Kern County, and that's not true, according to your research.
Right. The APA did a study looking exactly at that. And what they found is they went back and looked at all of the mass killings in the history in America. And what they found was that less than 1% were caused by someone with a serious mental illness. And looking further, of all the violence that was committed, only about 3% were caused by someone with serious mental illness. And I think there's a big distinction between someone with a serious mental illness and someone with mental health symptoms, right? Because we all have mental health symptoms. Everyone's occasionally depressed, occasionally has anxiety. So I don't think it's fair to lump everyone to say that shootings are caused by people who are mentally ill. And when we think about serious mental illness, these are things like schizophrenia, bipolar, serious depression, like life-disabling things. And the evidence just isn't there to support the hypothesis that these shooters are mentally ill.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on active shootings connected to mental illness?
Well, I mean, there's obviously something wrong with it if they're willing to take a life. Because that's not natural. It's not a natural behavior of the human species. So something triggered it. Something was there, whether they were bullied, they were abused, hatred. Like in the Parkland shooting, the female student that spoke out admitted to actually bullying him in school. And
that's exactly right. What they do find is the people that do commit these things have character traits such as anger, isolation, they're social rejects, and these things can be solved with interventions, right? And the idea that pegging these people as mentally ill, that creates an even bigger stigma for people seeking mental health services. So instead of people going saying, hey, there's a deficit in my life and I need some help with this, it makes people think if I go to get help, people are going to think I'm crazy, and I'm not going to, and which further, exacerbates those symptoms of feeling rejected, social isolation, feeling that no one cares about them. So I think a better, more appropriate approach is looking at sort of the root causes of how we can actually solve this problem versus trying to peg it on one specific group. Because in reality, even trying to target that group is ineffective according to the research.
And it's going to get worse if, in fact, we start denying the right to keep a gun, own a gun, for a person. If someone, they're trying to pass legislation where I can walk in and say, hey, I think so-and-so's having problems and it's an issue, and then without any due process, without anything, I fill out the paperwork, and if they own guns, they take them. And so a person who may be would seek help if they're depressed or whatever, will keep quiet if they know that someone could very easily say, okay, I can violate your civil rights based upon someone's view that you're mentally ill.
That is actual law. It's passed.
It did pass?
Yes.
Wow.
Can you clarify that? I'm sorry.
So currently, if you feel somebody's in danger to themselves or others, and they're a firearm owner, you can actually call the local police department, or I'm pretty sure it's the police department, and they will actually go take their firearms.
Wow.
Without any
investigating, they process after the fact.
And then what happens after they take the guns?
They get a mental evaluation,
and they're not able to have a gun ever again?
No, it depends after the mental evaluation.
Wow.
But as a general rule, once the police get your gun, it's hard to get it back.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a different topic. Here locally, there has been several incidents at our local schools involving guns or bullets. Just 2 days after the Parkland shooting, bullets were found in the school bathroom at Foothill High School. And later that month, there was several shooting threats found in the bathroom at Bakersfield High School, as well as McKee Middle School. Now, I know I have parents here, and I have a student who attends Bakersfield High School. What is the problem? Why do students feel that it's okay to write shooting threats on the bathroom, bring bullets to school? What's the issue?
They don't take it serious. They think it's all a huge joke. There's no respect towards these big issues, hot button issues like gun reform.
And your parents. And I know just before the show, we talked a little bit about your student, your child being at McKee, and your child is where?
Kern Valley High School.
Where there was another threat.
There was, like 2 or 3 of them.
And so walk me through phone calls, I guess, that you got from that you received from your
What
child.
phone calls?
I didn't get any.
What phone calls? We weren't notified. We were not notified by the school. The threat was made. They didn't put the children on lockdown. My son came home from school. They were told the fire department were on campus, the police were on campus, and my son and the children were told, just keep going to your classes. They weren't locked down. We weren't notified. So the children come home and tell us this. We have nobody that we can contact to find out what's really going on. I made contact the next morning at 8 o'clock to the superintendent and got the runaround. Well, it was not credible, but we couldn't tell anybody till the police closed the case. Well, why was the case not closed if it was found non-credible? This doesn't make any sense. We didn't receive notification until about 9:30 or 10 o'clock the following morning.
The principal at my daughter's school, Mr. Myers, he, during a parent, teacher, and facility everything thing, he said that he didn't feel there was reason to let the parents know. Because it wasn't, they were up until 2 in the morning searching the students' houses, interviewing the students and all of that, and they said because it wasn't a credible threat. And I said, okay, well that's great that you did your job, but let us know that there is a threat. You did investigate, and this is what happened. So I proceeded to ask him what the protocol is for if there is an active shooter that goes on my child's campus. And he said that they're trying to make our children think on their feet. So if there is an active shooter, run down the street and call your parents from your cell phone.
That's what the principal
That's what the principal said.
What are your thoughts with your child doing that?
It was just, my child doesn't have a cell phone. Well, she has a cell phone, but it's, it's on Wi-Fi, so there's not Wi-Fi down the street. How could she call us? if there's an active shooter, I have told her, all my kids, you be still. You find some place to hide. You do not be a moving target for that shooter. Because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people running and dodging and doing that. But when he said that, I just couldn't believe it. It was just a joke. Just a joke.
And I know that, Kat, you have been in contact with your principal about school shootings. What exactly did you write to the principal of the conversation that you had?
So after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, I actually that day, while it was like we were getting news information about it, we were hosting a Young Democrats meeting, and that was the only thing we talked about. And then we left the classroom like just shocked, because this was all happening the day that we were hosting a meeting. And the next week we came back in and we decided we were going to do something because of all of the media around March for Our Lives. We hosted a march on something like February 23rd or something. It was one of the weeks that we had a day off on that Monday, and we marched, and the news came out and recorded a student and I who organized it giving our speeches, which was the first speech I gave. And then the second one was after, for the March for Our Lives, a month after that, everyone was going to host a walkout. And as the Young Democrats Club discussed, we decided that a walkout wasn't the correct decision to do at BHS. And I wrote a speech, I wrote a letter to our principal, David Reese, asking for a minute of silence instead, actually 3 minutes of silence, and gave the reasons to why we wanted minutes of silence rather than to host a walkout. And when it came down to the day, he came on the intercom, read my letter, and then hosted the minutes of silence, and then beeped off the intercom.
Do you actually know the students or that are writing these threats? Don't say any names, but you know, I'm just trying to figure out, why do they think that this is okay to do? Is this a cool thing to do? Because we get in the media, we get so many school threat calls and bullets found, and it's alarming.
Attention seeking?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
a major issue.
I would say it's a mix. So let me speak on the behalf of students bringing guns to campus, which is sadly a common thing that happens at BHS. Some of these people we know just because BHS is such a tight-knit community. Even with the 3,000 students, it's like everybody kind of knows someone. There's a student recently arrested that I knew, and it was just shocking because it's that weird sense of, oh, but he wasn't like that. But he was, and that's why he got arrested, which is exactly what should have happened, because he did bring the weapon on campus. I'm sad to say that maybe 7 times out of the 3 years that I've been at Bakersfield High School, someone has brought a weapon on campus, and the process is usually a lockdown, and then police come and investigate.
My son knew the one, the young girl that made the threat at McKee, and that's why he said, you know, once they found out, you know, who it was, or the rumor had it, he said, I wasn't worried about it because I knew she wouldn't do it. Well, how do you know she wouldn't do it?
Did your son report it?
No, it was reported. No. The whole school the police were there and everything. It was it was just going around by that time. The rumor mill had taken off and who it was and who had written it. But once they said it, then he was like, oh, yeah, I wasn't worried because I know her. You don't know her.
Doesn't mean anything. I think in high school, it's maybe a social hierarchy, because a lot of the students get caught with these weapons because they're posting on Snapchat. There's a sort of pride, maybe, that like you're filming yourself whipping a gun around like that.
Reputation they want.
Yeah,
it's a front they're putting on. Yeah, they just want to be cool, and they think it's funny, and it's not. It's not.
And I know recently a student was arrested and sent to juvenile hall for having an airsoft gun on the campus of Independence High School. So it seems like, I don't know if in every case they're buckling down on these students who are doing this and are getting caught, or do you think that administration needs to do a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think there should be no open campuses.
There's only 2 currently in current high school districts.
Well, I'm just saying, like, my daughter's high school's open. People can come and go on the high school, even just, you know, to the football field or whatever. It should be closed off. When I was in high school, I had a friend of mine who was shot and killed on campus during lunchtime, and our campus was shut down. That was it. It was barbed wire and, you know, one entrance in through a gate to the parking lot and one entrance out. And then if you go to the office, you're checking in and you're beeping in. And that's what they need to do. They need to treat it like it's going to happen every day. We need to make sure nobody comes in with anything.
But I think our efforts shouldn't just stop at the school gate, right? This problem is indicative of a larger difficulty with violence in our society and violence in our community. And I think not only does it have to address what the specific keeping students safe at school so they feel appropriate to learn, but also how can we all take responsibility and be good partners with each other to make sure that we don't have this systemic violence in our community that just naturally flows into the school.
I want to feel safe on campus, but I don't want to feel like I'm in a prison. Because I'm not. I'm going to school. I shouldn't have to have tall barbed wire fences protecting me.
But wouldn't you rather have that than the fear of somebody coming in and just shooting it up?
I don't think I should be punished by barbed wire
fences. It's not punishment. It's extra security.
So hire extra security.
Or arm the teachers.
Or arm the teachers, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think Kat speaks to a really good point, that part of what we want to think about when decreasing violence in schools is also the idea of collaboration and coordination with between both parents and students. We know that the most effective interventions are the ones that everyone buys in on. And that I think that's a really important piece that Kat speaks to, about the need for those in power to listen to those who maybe aren't in total control.
Something to say, Rob?
Well, one of the biggest factors that we deal with, especially with these children bringing guns to school, is the parenting. I mean, where are the parents? Why do these kids have guns? They're not old enough to buy them, and I guarantee they're not their parents' guns, so they're obtaining them from different sources. And what happened with these students? Were they suspended? Were they criminalized? I mean, do we know who these students were? Was it gang related? Did somebody actually take a gun from their parents' safe if they kept it in the safe, stored it properly? Those are all factors that when you look into it, it's a lack of respect for others. You don't take a gun to school. It's not what you do, But back 30, 40 years ago, when people had them on the gun racks when they went to school and drove there because they hunted after school, that was normal. The problem with society nowadays is the social influence, the video games, the lack of parenting, lack of respect towards others. You don't, back 30, 40 years ago, when I went to school 20 years ago, we didn't cuss out our teachers. We didn't get in a fight with our teachers. We didn't abuse our teachers. We were there to learn and respect them, and vice versa. And nowadays, it's completely opposite. We see it in the news with all the high school problems that we're dealing with here in Kern County.
But it just, again, and that's what he's saying, it's more of a societal issue, and this is just one of the outlets, is the school shootings or the church shootings or the different violence, but it is a societal issue.
Part of what makes it a societal issue is the glamorization of the acts through the media.
Correct.
If you take someone that's disaffected, feels like they're not getting respected, feels like the world owes them something, one easy way to get back at everyone is by taking acts like these. And the more that we put this on the air, make them the sort of anti-hero, the more enticing it becomes to do this.
Yeah, they're martyrs, right?
Yeah. All right, California gun laws, we know, are among the strictest in the nation, one of the most strictest in the nation. So to purchase a firearm, I want to talk a little bit about this. You need a valid driver's license. Firearms safety certificate test needs to be passed. A background check. Plus, you need money to buy a gun, which I've learned all this from visiting with Raphael. He has owned Get a Gun for over 10 years. It's a firearms store in Kern County. And he was explaining the hoops that you have to go through to get a gun. Expand a little bit for the viewers that may not know how difficult it is to buy a gun in California.
It's really not. The biggest issue with purchase of a firearm is it was dealing with the background issue. So you need a valid driver's license or California ID. You'll need to take a firearm safety certificate test. It's a simple 30-question test, multiple choice. Unless you're a peace officer or you have a CCW, which you would still have to go through the basic process. Picking out a gun is honestly the hardest part about buying a gun. Passing the background check, it's a 10-day waiting process. Partial federal, partial state. The state does check for 5150s, restraining orders, court issues, suspended driver's licenses. There's a lot of issues that do affect it. Obviously, felons can't buy firearms. Domestic violence abusers can't buy firearms. Once the 10 days are up, you either get approved, denied, or delayed. Once you come in with an approval, you pick up your gun, good to go.
Okay. Talk about some of the misconceptions that people may have with purchasing a gun, getting your license, getting your CCW, and we'll go into those facts a little bit later. But
So a misconception that everybody gets approved. It's actually really hard to get approved. Because there is issues that do come up in people's background checks. Like, biggest thing, I mean, believe it or not paying your child support, you can't buy a gun. A lot of people don't know that. Because they suspend your driver's license, so therefore you don't have a valid driver's license and you can't buy a firearm. If you had a ticket out of state, red light camera type of thing, you don't know about warrants issued 5 years later, they pop up. Gun show loopholes. You hear about this all the time in the news. It's fictitious. It does not exist. It's completely impossible to do that. There's laws, there's federal laws, there's NICS background checks that the other states do. Now, some of the other states, you can. You walk in, you do a background check, and it's immediate. They call it into the feds unless you have a CCW, and then they issue it right then and there. California does have a 10-day waiting period, though.
The only state that has that, is that correct, or one of the
no,
only
like Alaska.
states?
I think Alaska's like 3-day. I think Nevada. It varies. It varies all over the nation. Unfortunately, I've only ever lived in California, but I do deal with some of the other states.
Yeah, can we see the CCW graphic right now? Just some of the facts. So fully automatic guns are banned, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Since 1934.
Okay. And a 10-day wait background check, which you were just talking about. And ammo changes July 2019.
That's correct,
Let's
yes.
talk about that.
So in July of 2019, you'll have to do a background check to be able to purchase ammunition in the state of California. That's it.
Your thoughts?
Why?
Good,
You can have the
Good
gun,
question.
but you can't have any
Why?
bullets? You can't have any ammunition?
Because they've determined that you can't, since they can't take guns away from us, it's harder than they think it is, then they're going to go after the ammunition. But the ammunition is to stop straw purchases on ammunition. So say Joe Blow has a gun and illegally obtained, he can't legally go in there and buy ammunition, so he'll send his girlfriend or friend or whatever to buy the ammunition. And that's where that comes into play there.
So it's no real deterrent.
Well, we don't know yet. The law goes into effect July of 2019, and when that finally hits and it goes through, we'll see what the proponents of it are. They don't ever really specific as far as the way the laws work until we actually get shoved down our throats.
Hasn't it been tried before, though, in other states?
No, we're number one. We're the guinea pigs. We have it. There was a Wasserman in Florida flat out said that since we can't take your guns, we're going to take your ammo. Yeah. And that was right after the Parkland shooting.
And Pastor V.K. Jones, I wanted to ask you specifically because I did go to your active shooter training that you held at your church here in Bakersfield.
Right.
Why did you hold that training? Why was that important to you?
Because I feel like it is a responsibility, it is my responsibility to make sure that the people that come to that church are safe. And in any environment, one of the good things that Robert DeLessio did in the training was to teach that any environment, that same process works. So that we live in a society where we know there's a possibility of ending up in a place where there's an active shooting, and how do you survive that? I kind of agree and then disagree with I can't remember which lady said about find somewhere to hide. Hiding is one of the things that you can do. But getting out of there is one of the things you can do as well. If there is the possibility of doing that without becoming the focus of the shooter. And so just the training to make people think about it. If it happens, and there's no training, you're going to get panic. At least if it happens and you've had some training, you've had a chance to think about it, maybe some decisions will be made that will save lives.
Do you think students need to do active shooter training?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes, I do.
You think it should be in schools?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Currently,
a lot more than fire drills.
Yeah, and earthquake drills.
Well, earthquake drills, yeah, but when was the last time a school burned down?
Yeah. True.
BHS has been pretty close recently. Currently at BHS, the only active shooter, if there isn't a shooter on campus, our teacher has told us to just run down Oleander. That's it. Just go into the neighborhoods and hide.
But if an active shooter comes into a classroom, how do you get past them to run down the street to hide?
Not saying that it's in the classroom, but I mean, we're all old enough to make our own decisions. So if a student decides that sitting and hiding is the best decision for them, they could do that. And in that sort of chaos, there's no way a teacher is going to control a student, especially a student who's almost of age.
So what about those? I see those things advertised on TV and I don't know, Facebook and all the different things. You know, the triangle you can put over the top of the door so the door can't open, or the things you slide and do like this underneath the door. Like, have those been tested to see like how? You know, do they work? Is it something that could be implemented in the schools that they could have that? I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be that expensive.
Another thing you're talking about, this student actually made it. And the school all bought one for each of the classrooms. He wanted to do it to make the school safer and everything. And you just slide it on the door, it takes seconds. And then the shooter cannot get into that door. They cannot come in. Yeah. There's been videos I've seen of little kids in like first grade kindergarten where they have red tape to where they look in from the door. This is where the shooter cannot see. It's blind spots for them. They have their desk, they tip them upside down for protection and do that. There's a video I showed my kids where, because you know they mostly have their backpacks full of books. If you put 4 to 6, if you have your books, you put that in front of you. And there's a guy on Facebook that was showing that it didn't penetrate like the 3rd book or something. And so it's just like little things like that, just that needs to be, I don't know, just more drills and more safety of that nature.
What do you got? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was going to add, and somebody with a gun who's not afraid to confront the person who's trying to do harm.
Absolutely.
Because it takes time. If you call the police, it's going to take time for them to get there. We see it all the time with 911 calls where the person is trying to stay alive until the police get there. If you don't have somebody on a campus with a gun, trained to use it, the person who's trying to do harm to students is going to come out on top every single time.
Absolutely.
And I know that media coverage, we show when there's a school shooting, when there's a church shooting, we show coverage all week if it happens, right? And we talked about this a little bit before our panel, and we talked about your frustrations. So how do you all feel about the coverage when you see things like, I mean, you just saw a video, a recap of several mass shootings that happened just within the last 10 years. I mean, how does that make you feel to keep replaying it and then having the conversation with your children?
Well, you have to, you know, that it's not like a short video like you showed. When there's a mass shooting, it goes on and on and on, and it goes for days. And so the children are exposed to that. I know in the elementary school where my younger children go, they have discussions after it happens. They actually have discussions about it because the children see it on TV, and it's just over and over. And I think the media just over-sensationalizes the situation.
They glorify it.
Yeah. You're giving this person all this credit for what they did, right? Now everybody knows his name, and, you know, it's just over and over. So he got, you know, the notoriety.
Everybody knows who he is. The shooter is more famous than the kids that died.
That's right.
I guarantee nobody can name one of the kids that died.
Yeah, absolutely.
But everybody knows what school it was, what he used. You know, he's still alive. You know, he walked away from the campus completely unharmed. Everybody knows the cop didn't bother to enter the classroom, and or the other police officers. Everybody was told to stand down, hide. There's more video of the police officers just walking up to the door and hiding than there was of anything else.
So what would you like to see us report? What would you like to see the media report? How would you find out the information?
When it comes down to the school shootings or just shootings in general, or?
Both.
I mean, you never see any of the good that guns do on the news. It's very, very rare. I mean, 3 million lives were saved last year because of firearms.
Right.
3 million. 11,000 were lost because of firearms that weren't suicide related. So suicide is a totally different number. They're going to use whatever they can, whenever they can. Guns just make it easier for them. But 11,000 lives were lost. 650 of those just in Chicago. You know, 900 of those were actual police conflict, so done by police. So that's still 9,500 deaths that were, you know, one-on-one. And here's the worst part about it: only 2% of those guns were legally owned. They're all stolen, crime, you know, whatever means they used to obtain those firearms. 2% of all those 9,000, so we'll say that the 11,000 were actually legally owned firearms.
So with that fact, don't you think we should go through more rigorous background checks to make sure that all these guns are obtained legally?
Nope.
The people that are going to use them illegally
are going to get that.
Shouldn't there be more control over that, though?
Okay,
No,
so if
that's
you
the whole
can
point.
If you like make it harder for law-abiding citizens to get protection for themselves and their families, do you think that's going to change the mind of the criminals that keep getting them?
Yeah, only 2% of those 11,000 were legally owned firearms.
Yeah, I mean, the criminals, they're going to get it. They're going to use them. Changing the laws or all of that is not going to stop the violence.
And the whole idea that we don't have background checks now is wrong. You go through, to have a CCW, you go through an FBI background check. You have to be, you go through a rigorous process. To buy a gun, you go through that process.
And evil will use whatever means possible.
Absolutely.
The Boston bombing, from the marathon.
Right.
The 2 pressure cookers from 2 refugees.
Right.
The airplanes in 9/11.
They used an X-Acto knife or a utility knife to kill 3,000 plus people with airplanes. To take over the airplanes.
Absolutely.
Just shows you it's not the tool. It's the mindset.
Yeah,
person.
Absolutely.
My response to your question, though, is I think that an active shooter's name ought to be given in the initial aftermath of the event, and that person's name should never be mentioned again.
Absolutely.
Do you
Never.
all feel like that?
Yeah, we didn't say it during Young Dems. We refused to say it.
And I even think going as far as not showing the images of the shooting would be particularly helpful. I know there was a study done after 9/11 where people who came in to work with the trauma survivors, and they found that even kids, miles away from the Twin Towers, were experiencing PTSD-like symptoms. What the correlation they made is because the news kept showing the Twin Towers falling over and over and over again, the kids that watched it actually got that vicarious trauma from viewing it. And so they were exhibiting similar symptoms to those who were actually in the Twin Towers while it was hit. So even just the viewing of the images can actually produce harm in people.
We choose not to watch it in our home. When they start that coverage and just run it, and we don't watch it in our home. We turn it off. I don't think there's a need to know what, every detail of, where was he at 15 minutes ago? Where was he at an hour ago? Where was he at 3 hours before? Where was he at 12 hours before? All that information. That's what the police need or whatever to deal with it, but everybody doesn't need that information.
It's so dramatized. The whole aspect of his mindset, him getting away with literally with a murder from the get, but all the background checks, the FBI looking into him, the police looking into him, all these different aspects of him legally buying the firearms. That whole aspect, then going into the school and shooting up the school and nobody doing anything about it, and him just walking down the street like nothing ever happened. It's all there. Wow, anybody else can do that. He did it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, in closing, what would you like to see done? What can we do better in our community with bringing guns into schools, bringing bullets found in bathrooms? What can we do right here in Kern County? This is your opportunity to speak out. So, what do you want to see done? Is there a problem? Do you feel like there is a problem here in Kern County with violence?
I think it's training, like we've all said. I think it needs to be offered in a community level, and at a church level, at a school level, however we can get that information out. There are some people, maybe, let's just say elderly, who may not be able to get it through their church or their school, or through school or whatever, so some community effort to put forth some trainings on what to do in mass shootings, period, whether you're at the movie theater or you're in your school.
I think we have to have parents like these ladies here who are active and involved in their children's lives. There's so many children in schools now who already are on their own. They don't get any guidance. It doesn't make sense that you have a mass shooting and people lose their lives, and a person's response to that is, let me put my school on edge by throwing bullets in a sink, or by writing a note, leaving it on the wall. And while people are running around spastic and crazy, I'm sitting in the background laughing and watching all of this happen. And so I think that there has to be some return to some civilized behavior in some areas. We just have to deal with. And I think part of it is a spiritual issue. Obviously, as a pastor, I think that part of it is a spiritual issue, that people need That needs to be a return to a level of spirituality that's just missing.
Absolutely.
Glorification, I feel, is one of the biggest problems that we experience in the news, and the agenda that the news seems to portray. They like these things. It pulls attention to them. They have campouts. They have these big events and stuff like that. About a week after the Parkland shooting, we had the Maryland shooter. So the juvenile entered the school, 17-year-old, because this is right then when they're all talking about we need to raise the age to 21, and then you have a 17-year-old enter the campus with a gun, and he was taken down by the school cop. That lasted on the news about a day. I mean, it was literally a week after the Parkland shooting, but it was on the news for a day, and it was done. I mean, it's like, oh, cool, yeah, nobody died, other than and because the student didn't die, but he took him out.
Right.
There would have been a lot more, a lot more potential deaths if the school officer hadn't taken care of the situation. But we don't hear that. There's no glorification of that. Like, hey, guns did something good. Right. The gun protected the school. The peace officer did that. It's different. And as far as our schools here in town being better armed and stuff, we have on the high school level, I believe there's only one officer per high school level, and that's it. They're well armed though. They have nice guns. I'll tell you that. About 2 years ago, they armed the school police officers with some nice weapons. So for that, they've got great training. They got it for that. But there's only one officer. Every time there's a bank robbery, who do they take out first?
Yep.
They take out the security guard. It's standard procedure anytime so they take out the school officer, or they watch them go to lunch, or they watch them leave to take somebody else, and then it's a full campus ready to go.
Yeah.
The whole element of surprise with the potentially armed teachers to help diffuse the situation is the best resolution to it in my eyes.
Absolutely.
Because they don't know. Hey, some teachers might be carrying guns. We don't know who, we don't know whether they do or they don't. It's that most criminals don't want to die. They want to stand their ground, do their thing, and walk away. But when the element of death is presented to them, they tend not to want to do it.
Right. Absolutely.
I'd like to see more armed and trained security guards on campus, but I'd also like to build relationships with them. I don't want to fear them ever. I have pretty good relationships with most of the security guards on our campuses. Or on our campus, for BHS, and they respect us if we respect them. And I think that's a very important part of high school, is building respect with your teachers, but your teachers also respecting you. It's not a hierarchy in any situation. It's mutual respect.
Anything to add, Jason?
Yeah, I think that maybe focusing on guns is grabbing the problem by the wrong handle. I think we even need to take a step back and focus on what makes our community unsafe, what makes people turn to violence. And we know the answer to that, right? And we can actually solve that. Instead of having different people or different agencies work in silos, you work on the education piece, I'll work on the mental health piece, how can we integrate our services together and help each other out? Because we know that create a society where children feel safe, where parents feel safe, where people have meaningful things to do with their life is really the solution to sort of the problem of violence to begin with. How do we make mental health access easier for people to get? How do we have basic necessities for people to use as resources? I think once we answer that question, maybe the whole rest of this mass shooting thing sort of just falls off.
Tammy, any last thoughts?
I agree with so many different things. I just really think it's a community thing. We really need to all come together and stop pointing fingers at, oh, it's mental health, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, oh, it's this. Well, then let's all come together and find a common ground and reach out to at-risk kids, at-risk families that that they need it. They don't have the parents there, or there's trouble going on at home, or the kids are getting bullied, or we need to stop this walking out and moments of silence and reach out to people that are not being reached out to, because if we're just sitting there in silence, nothing's being done.
Yeah. If we're on our cell phones,
nothing's being done.
Yeah, don't blame the tool, blame the mind behind the tool.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you all so very much for being here with me tonight, and I want to thank the viewers out there for tuning into our first episode of Unscripted. If you would like to find out more about firearms in Kern County, please log on to our website, turnto23.com. I'm Alicia Patillo. Good night.